How are we doing tonight? Did you guys know it takes 2,700 liters of water to make one cotton shirt? Just to put that in perspective, that's what the average person drinks in 2.5 years. Cotton is the most common natural fiber used to make clothing. In fact, 33% of all clothing is made from it. The problem with this, however, is that cotton is a very thirsty crop. On top of that, it accounts for 24% of pesticides and 11% of insecticides in the world, despite using only 3% of the world's arable land. Despite using only 3% of the world's arable land. I started a clothing company called Luxury Leaf in light of this, because I recognize the issues that are occurring in the fashion industry. Like I said, some of these include it's very polluting. It's a very polluting crop. Excuse me. So, as I mentioned, I started this clothing company, and I've become extremely knowledgeable about hemp with my time researching. So I discovered that this plant actually has kaleidoscopic uses. And fortunately, one of them is eco-friendly clothing, so I was actually able to start the clothing company. But like I said, I know lots of stuff about hemp. And some of these things I feel are very important to share with you guys, especially now as we discuss the keys to the future. But first, it's important to discuss the problems that the fashion industry faces before we can talk about the keys needed to solve them. The fashion industry is the second most polluting industry in the world. This is an extreme problem to our environment, and left unchecked will be extremely detrimental to the future of our society as a whole. So, I propose a solution, and it's called hemp. Hemp requires 4 times less water to grow than cotton and produces twice the textile yield. Not to mention it's a natural carbon sequester. Hemp requires no fertilizers, no GMO seeds, or any type of pesticides to grow. This is extremely powerful. So anything made from hemp is actually organic and completely natural for you. On top of that, it's hypoallergenic, UV protectant, and its porous nature actually makes for a breathable but comfortable fit with clothing. So, hemp. Let's talk a little bit about its history. As you guys might know, hemp is commonly associated with marijuana, but this is the stigma that I want to break. See, an analogy I like to use to compare the two is to compare them to dogs and wolves. While they come from the same family, they're actually genetically different. Hemp contains less than 0.3% THC. This is the psychoactive ingredient commonly found in marijuana. Simply put, this means that you can't get the munchies from hemp. So let's talk a little bit about hemp's history. So the oldest piece of fabric is 10,000 years old, and it was actually a bit of hemp fabric, dating back to 10,000 BC. Think about that. The oldest thing known to man is a piece of hemp fabric. That's amazing. So, a little bit more about hemp. Presidents Thomas Jefferson and Washington both grew it. Bet you didn't know that. Did you know that Americans were legally bound to grow hemp in the colonial and early republic eras? And you could actually pay your taxes with it? We need to go back to those days. So the history, it was a very successful crop. But then in 1937, the United States actually begged for its outlaw. So what happened was there were a few greedy businessmen, typically. These businessmen were some of the most elite at the time, okay? So, for example, let's use the DuPont family. If you haven't heard of the DuPont family, they were actually the creators of the synthetic fiber called nylon. And as I mentioned, you can make clothing with hemp. So this was putting a direct pressure on their business model. On top of that, you could, as I'll mention later in my presentation, you can actually make biodiesel from hemp. And there were many big oil corporations at the time who actually felt this pressure as well because of the hemp oil. And on top of that, William Randolph Hearst. You might have heard of him in your history classes, but this guy was the top of the line newspaper. He ran every single newspaper in America, pretty much. And as I'll mention again later, you can make paper from hemp. So again, a direct pressure on their business. So what did they do? They decided to lobby. They put millions of dollars into this lobbying effort and happened to coincide perfectly with Henry Anslinger. So Henry Anslinger was the commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics at the time, and he was already moving to outlaw marijuana. So it's actually genius on his part. What did he do? So these guys all wanted to outlaw hemp, so he created a mass propaganda, which basically just associated hemp and marijuana together, and now everyone thinks hemp is the devil's grass. But that's not the case. Hemp is actually a very, very important crop for our future, because every part of the hemp plant can be used, so there's virtually no waste. The seeds are packed with protein, amino acids, and actually make for a wonderful health snack. Personally, I enjoy hemp seeds on my morning yogurt with my glass of orange juice. But on top of that, the most important part of the hemp plant is the stalks and the fibers, because these are where the industrial uses come into play. So, one of these uses, as I mentioned before, is to make paper and canvases. But what you didn't know is that hemp is actually the ideal plant to do so. This is because it only requires 90 days to grow, 3 months compared to trees that take a lifetime. On top of that, I want you guys to think about the global economic implications that this would have, the jobs that would be created, the forests that would be saved, and the species that wouldn't go extinct if we just use hemp to make paper. On top of these uses, you can make biodiesel from hemp. And actually, the creator of the diesel engine, Rudolf Diesel, intended for the diesel engine to be run on hemp. You might have heard of Henry Ford, and he took this idea of the diesel engine and added another step to it. So not only did his car run on hemp oil, it was actually made from hemp plastic. Yeah, I said it, hemp plastic, a biodegradable, green alternative to the current plastics we're using. And on top of that, it was proven to be 10 times stronger than steel. So, biodiesel, paper, what else can we do with hemp? Another thing we can do with hemp is to, So not only is hemp good for paper and biodiesel, you can actually make sustainable homes from hemp. So Hempcrete, if you haven't heard of it, is a mixture of hemp herds, water, and lime rock. And when put together, it creates a wonderful material that's actually sustainable, fireproof, and weatherproof. On top of that, it's very insulated. So what that means for you guys is you don't need to add any additional cooling or heating items to your house. Simply by having a home made from Hempcrete, you'll be able to have your house warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And the best part about it is you can sleep comfortably at night knowing you did your part to make the world a better place. As I said before, left unchecked, the future of dirty fashion is to be an environment in which producers produce more and consumers consume more. In fact, there were 60% more purchased garments in 2014 compared to 2000, but each garment was kept for half as long. This is a severe problem. Hemp Global Studies estimates that for every ton of hemp grown, it represents 1.63 tons of CO2 absorption. On top of that, hemp doesn't just take in bad toxins from the air and make it cleaner. It actually can do the same in soil. And this was proven in the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Hemp was actually planted on the site, and it was found to take in high levels of cadmium. This is the common heavy metal that's found after a situation like that, and it was actually able to improve the soil. Amazing. Hemp replenishes 60 to 70% of nutrients back to the soil, so it's actually a very attractive rotational crop for farmers. But that's not my point. My point here today is to suggest that we don't try anything new. All I'm simply suggesting is that we use historically proven alternatives that work within our planetary boundaries. The key to the future is here, and it's hemp. Thank you.